As President of the New Economy Forum, I would like to wish you a very warm welcome to a new event of the Forum Europa, organized thanks to the sponsorship of Solaria Photovoltaic Group and Assisa Healthcare Group. On behalf of whose chairman, Enrique Giacitera and Francisco Bora, we extend you a very warm greeting. Today is the European Day for Victims, and today we are commemorating the 20th anniversary of the terrorist attack on the Atocha station in Madrid. Before we begin, I would like to propose a moment of silence for the victims and their relatives.
Muchas gracias. Hoy tenemos.
Today we are very honored because we are welcoming Ms. Ylva Johansson, European Commissioner for Home Affairs. It is also a pleasure to introduce Fernando García Marlasca, Minister of Home Affairs of Spain. Dear Minister, you have the floor. So I would like to introduce Ylva Johansson. First of all, I would like for all of us to remember the 192 victims of the terrible attacks of March 2024. And I also want to mention that Spanish military died when 7 terrorists also committed another attack in Leganés in Madrid. So I want to express my condolences to all the families. For me, it is a great pleasure to introduce Ylva Johansson, Secretaries of State for Justice, Home Affairs, Director General of the CNI, representatives of the United Nations Commissioner for Refugees, ambassadors, parliamentarians, and dear friends. Thank you very much, José Luis, for organizing this breakfast meeting this morning. For me, it is an honor to introduce the Commissioner for Home Affairs, Ylva Johansson. As you probably know, Ylva is European Commissioner for Home Affairs, but she has a very active background in politics in Sweden. She has very long experience, and she has a very strong character and very strong personality. She was a member of the Swedish Parliament for many years, and ever since she was young, very, very young, she held positions of responsibility, which for us social democrats are essential. She was Minister for Public Education, she was Minister of Health and Employment, in Sweden, and since 2019 she has been Commissioner for Home Affairs of the European Commission. And in these years and during the last Spanish presidency of the Council, we had a very close relationship with Ylva on different matters, but and this was really a very fruitful cooperation. Without her, all that we have achieved in the realm of home affairs would have been impossible without her good work. And I also want to mention that Juan Fernando López Aguilar is also with us. He is president of the LIBE Commission for Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs of the European Parliament, and he has also done essential work over the years. The current European times are very challenging, and as far as Spain is concerned, we have reaffirmed our capacity to lead Europe, and we have shown our European spirit. We have promoted the broadening and the enlargement of the Schengen space to countries like Bulgaria and Romania. This was something that had been on our to-do list for over 10 years. We have also kept consolidating our relationship with the Western Balkans and also with Latin America on home affairs. This Europeistic vocation is particularly necessary in the current volatile and uncertain environment we live in, which makes things very complex in Europe, and that is why I think that the European Union is now more important than ever. We need to tackle all the common challenges we are facing, and for that it is extremely important to come to collective solutions based on consensus, based on a spirit of solidarity and unity. A few days ago, we celebrated a few years ago, the war on the Ukraine. We commemorated the second anniversary of the war in the Ukraine, and Europe is still giving assistance to people fleeing the war, and we are still trying to address the impact that the war has on our homeland security. We need to be attentive to this conflict, as well as to the conflict in the Middle East, and be ready to address the threats that it poses to Europe. And also, today, a day like today, 20 years ago, Madrid and the whole of Spain suffered the terrible attacks on Atocha, where so many people died and so many people were injured. This is something we will never forget. In the last few days, many people commemorated these events, and today we're celebrating the European Day for the Victims of Terrorism, and it's going to be a central celebration in Spain, here in Madrid. Spain, unfortunately, is not alien to terrorism, and Europe is not alien to terrorism either. And one of the biggest priorities in Europe is precisely the fight against terrorism. Of course, new realities have now been incorporated, such as the use of new technologies, and we shouldn't lower our guard, because it is essential to also give our support to the victims of terrorism, and this is something that the ministry has been working on for many years. We have, for example, approved the conclusions of the Council for the improvement of the support and recognition of victims of terrorism. These are extremely important things. And another important thing is the fight against drug trafficking and the protection of the resilience of our critical infrastructures and migration. As far as migration is concerned, we should recognize the importance of having achieved under our presidency and with the support of Commissioner Johansson a decisive political agreement for the European Pact on Migration and Asylum. This agreement constitutes a historical achievement of huge importance. Migration is a European challenge which requires European responses. And against this background, we should mention the trip that the Commissioner and I made last week together with the Secretary of State for Migrations of Belgium to Mauritania, where we established a complex partnership, a cross-sectional partnership between the European Union and the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. So, finding solutions to better manage migration of asylum from a global, well-balanced and preventive approach based on an equal sharing of responsibility and solidarity have been a priority during the Spanish presidency of the European Council. And I would like to mention another important area where Commissioner Johansson has made a particular effort, and I am sure that we are going to be successful in that area. Because for many months we have been working to establish a legal framework to address the threat of sexual abuse of minors online. Unfortunately, we were not successful, but thanks to the meetings we held on the subject, we were finally able to agree on the content of 85 out of 89 articles of the proposal of the Commission. But this work is not going to be to no avail, because it will reinforce something that we all agree on. I'm sure we need to avail ourselves of the legal, material, and operational means to eradicate these despicable practices against children who are so vulnerable. And we need to do it with respect of other fundamental rights, such as the privacy of communications, but also being aware that criminals are going to take advantage of any loophole they may find in this complex digital world. This challenge, as any other challenges, have to be tackled based on solidarity, responsibility, and unity. We need to be aware that we're living through difficult times, and we need to be aware of the important role of the European Union in an increasingly complex world. And one of the people that have demonstrated the biggest commitment with the European Union is precisely Ms. Johansson. And we are all looking forward to listening to her. I'm very thankful to her for her indefatigable work, because she has made it possible for all of us to celebrate this European Day of Victims Against Terrorism. The Commissioner is fully aware that the European Day of Victims Against Terrorism should be held in Madrid today, because she's particularly sensitive to these matters. And today is a very sad day, but I would like to also mention another one of the characteristics of the Commissioner, because she is a very good planner. She is a very good strategist. She knows that to obtain results, you need to work little by little. And that is probably because she is such a big fan of soccer, particularly of Liverpool. Her Anfield means so much for her. Yesterday, they The match ended in a draw. Arsenal, Liverpool, Liverpool, Arsenal. I'm convinced that Liverpool this year, dear Ylva, is going to win the Premier League, and I'm also convinced that all of the challenges that Europe faces and the challenges that you raised in 2019 when you became commissioner, I'm sure that you will be able to address, or you will have addressed all those challenges at the end of your mandate. Everybody here is looking forward to listening to you, and I would like to wish you all the best. And I'm fully aware that people with your professional capacity and your personal qualities are indispensable if we want to make the values of the European Union viable. Thank you.
Señora comisaria.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you, Fernando, for the kind words. It's a very special day today, and it's a sad day, of course. We will today celebrate the EU Remembrance Day of the victims of terrorism here in Madrid. And a very special occasion, of course, in Madrid. But we will also gather more than 100 victims of terrorism from all over Europe, from different terrorist attacks here in Madrid today for this commemoration. I hope that you will have questions to ask me, but I will start with a little bit of introduction on a few topics from my portfolio. This portfolio I have I'm responsible, as you probably know, everything against organized crime, against sexual abuse of children, trafficking of people, against terrorism, against corruption, everything related to borders, internal borders, external borders, everything related to visas, everything related to traveling in and out of the EU, and of migration and asylum. And I would like to touch upon the child sexual abuse and migration with you. And then, of course, I'm happy to answer questions on everything in my portfolio. First, what Fernando mentioned, these crimes against children, as you all know, and you can easily understand, it's a heinous crime when you commit rapes against small children. But what most people don't know is how common this is. We estimate that 1 girl out of 5 is a victim of sexual violence during her childhood, and 1 boy out of 10. That means that we all know these children, and we all know grown-ups that was abused when they were children. And very often people don't talk about it until they are grown up. Very often this crime goes on for years and years in the silence, because very often the perpetrator is someone close. Could be a family member, a neighbor, a priest, a football trainer. And the child is so vulnerable and very often don't speak out at all. How can we rescue the children? How can we find and prosecute the perpetrators? It's actually when they share these videos with their peers online. Internet companies have been detecting private communication for more than 10 years for child sexual abuse material. In 1 year, in 2022, here in the European Union, we received 5.2 million videos and pictures just from the EU from the internet companies. And that is when police get these pictures and videos, that's when the investigation starts. And this is the most common way to find the child, to identify the child, to rescue the child, and to prosecute the perpetrator. And what's at stake now is that this reporting and detecting in the private communication might be forbidden if we do not approve a law that will make it possible for this detection to continue. And if it's going to be forbidden, we're going to go blind. We're going to have zero reports. Police will not have the reports to start with. And we have already seen how this crime is moving from the dark web to the end-to-end encrypted communication. We know from research it takes about 8 minutes to establish a relation with a child online. We have seen an enormous increase of grooming online. We have seen also that those that watch rapes of children online, more than 40% of them after that go and contact a child in the offline world. It seems that people are radicalizing by asking for worse and worse content. Some people think that we are talking about teenagers exploring their sexuality online. No, we are not. We are talking about severe violence. Internet Watch Foundation has been looking at this. They categorize the violence in different categories. Category A is the worst violence. It has doubled in 3 years. When it's about children between the age of 0 and 2 years, it's more than 80% category A violence. These are children they cannot report. They cannot tell anybody. The only one who can actually see that this is ongoing is when they post this online and send it. And that's how we got the report from the internet companies and for the police. Because this is such a silent crime, most people don't know about it. But we need to talk about it. And we need to talk about these victims. And we need to make sure that police can go after perpetrators and rescue the children. Because without these reports, it's going to be extremely difficult for police to rescue the children. And with the online component, this crime is getting worse and worse and worse. It's really escalating. Also a few words on migration. When I took office 4.5 years ago almost, we came from a situation where migration was a toxic topic in the EU, where the situation was blocked, totally blocked in the European Council. You remember the situation? It was impossible to take any decisions. We came from a situation with the migration crisis in 2015, 2016, where more than 2 million, mostly Syrians, came to the EU. In my view, we should have activated the Temporary Protection Directive at that time, but it was not possible. And I got the task, find an agreement on migration. It was not easy, and it took me more than 4 years to find this agreement. And thanks to very good cooperation with several presidencies, and the last one, the Spanish one, and thanks to good cooperation with the European Parliament, we actually managed to rebuild trust between member states, to rebuild trust to manage migration, and to get everybody to realize that migration policies is not a zero-sum game. If and when we cooperate and have a decent Europeanized migration system, we are all winners. Without, we are all losers, and the biggest losers are the migrants themselves. So we need to find this agreement, and it took us a long time to really reach this situation. But now we are there, and we have the agreement, and now implementation is going to be the key. But just to give you also a bit of an overview on the content of the pact, but also on the migration situation in the EU. Last year, we had 3.5 million migrants coming to the European Union legally. 3.5 million. At the same time, we had 380,000 migrants coming irregularly. So that's 10% compared to the legal migration. Why do people come here legally? They come mainly because they're falling in love with an EU citizen, but also because of work, study, research, and some also for protection. Every year, around 2 million people leave the European Union, mostly because they are falling in love with the citizens outside the European Union, or to work, or to study, or to do research. So we are growing with 1.5 million per year on legal migration. This is the big migration moves. Even though we are growing with migration, we're still probably going to need more migration, because the workforce in the European Union is shrinking. The total workforce is shrinking with 1 million per year right now, because we are an aging society, as you know. So that needs to be addressed in many ways, of course, but also migration is not the solution, but it's also part of what's necessary. But the irregular arrivals of migrants, it's really a challenge. We've seen a lot of increase towards the Canary Islands, towards Lampedusa, towards the Greek islands. Islands are particularly vulnerable here. And we also see a lot of lives lost. Last year, more than 3,000 people lost their lives on these smuggling routes towards the European Union. So that means that we need to prevent these irregular departures and instead invest in legal pathways. What do we have in the pact? We have a better protection of our external borders. We have a screening of everybody coming to the European Union, and we have swift processes for those that are probably not in need of international protection, coming from countries where they are most likely not in need of international protection. And we have a lot of those actually coming from countries where they're not in need of international protection. They will have a swift process already at the borders and a swift return decision. We also have a better protection of the rights of the asylum applicants. We will have free legal counseling through the whole process for all asylum applicants. We will also have a better protection when it comes to vulnerable people, unaccompanied minors, families with children, but also that we have better protection on the fundamental rights with the independent monitoring also at the borders to make sure that people have access to the procedures. We will also have a better reception capacity and reception facilities to make sure that we never more will see any Morias. Third, we have a mandatory solidarity. So that means that no member state will be left alone when there is a pressure or even a crisis. And this mandatory solidarity is really unprecedented. We've never seen this in EU law before. And it's also with a high number of relocation, but also other ways of showing solidarity to make sure that no member state will be without support from the others if that's necessary. What is not in the pact, because the pact is 11 legislative files, but it's EU law. And that means we also need to address what's outside the EU. We need to work with third countries, helping them in managing migration, preventing irregular departures, investing in legal pathways. This we need to do, and that is not solved by EU legislation. We need to fight the smugglers, because the huge majority of people arriving irregularly use smugglers. And the smugglers are increasingly professional, increasingly international, and increasingly violent. We have on a weekly basis testimonies of migrants that have been forced with weapons into the boats, even when they see that the weather condition is really, really dangerous. We have been seeing people drowning, of course, we also see them locked into lorries where there is no oxygen, actually, and people are actually being killed there. So we need to fight the smugglers, and I took the initiative to launch a global alliance against migrant smuggling in November, and that was a lot of countries globally that came to Brussels to be part of these actions, because we need to work along the routes. Last thing, and what I'm most proud of with this pact, is that we have reached a situation where migration is a normal political issue in the EU. That was my aim, to make migration as boring as other EU policies. You know, Commission make a proposal, nobody's happy. Parliament and Council starts working on the proposals and then find an agreement, and then everybody thinks, well, it's a little bit better than when we started. And I think we have reached that now, that we have a normal procedure when it comes to dealing with migration and legislative fights on migration. And we can see that this is also who benefits from this. More than 4 million Ukrainian refugees benefit from this, that we manage this whole crisis, this war of aggression from Russia and all the Ukrainians fleeing. We managed to activate the Temporary Protection Directive. We managed to host. Today, the European Union are hosting 7 million refugees. That's 20% of the global refugee population. It's not so bad, huh? And even we are doing that, we are not stepping down when it comes to the pledges for resettlement. What we also have is when I go, as I frequently do together with Fernando, to a third country to discuss and make agreements with them on migration, they used to say to me, well, you can come to me to discuss, but why don't you put your own house in order first? Now we will have our own house in order, and that makes our voice so much stronger globally. Thank you.
Comisaria Johansson, muchas gracias.
Commissioner Johansson, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for joining us, Commissioner. Together with Minister Marlaska and the Secretary of State for Asylum and Migration of Belgium, on Thursday you signed an alliance with Mauritania to reinforce prevention of irregular migration and fight smugglers and the increase of trips from Mauritania to the Canary Islands, which is the first stage of their trip to Europe. So, in this context, what would you say about the external dimension of the European Union vis-à-vis the presence of growing numbers of refugees and the arrival of immigrants in Spain and the European Union? Another question is, what mechanisms does the European Commission have to check that agreements such as that between the EU and Mauritania or Tunisia are effectively implemented? And the third question is, what do you expect from this agreement with Mauritania, and what concessions has the European Union made to Mauritania in exchange for their signing this agreement?
For this question first, I think it's absolutely necessary that we work with partner countries, not only our neighboring countries, but with countries along the migratory routes. And we need to address the root causes of migration, and we need to support third countries in their way of managing migration. It's about protection of refugees in their country. It's about voluntary returns of migrants back to their country of origin. It's about building capacity and also investing in legal pathways. So this is absolutely necessary. I don't think that we could ever manage migration by only focusing internally in the EU or at our external borders. We need to work along the routes. So Mauritania is a long-standing partner, a very good partner to the EU and to Spain. And Mauritania has to play a more and more important role as a stable partner in a very unstable region. So it's important for us to work with Mauritania. Now they will also have the presidency of the African Union. So that was also another reason to work close with Mauritania. They are also supporting our resolutions when it comes to condemning Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. So they are a good partner in many aspects. And they have been so for a long time. Now Mauritania is facing challenges because of the instability in the region. A lot of people from Mali, for example, entering into Mauritania, which, as you know, is a very poor country, and in areas where they could cause a lot of tensions and challenges in the country. So for us, it's important to show that we are there to support Mauritania when they are meeting challenges, but also to continue on our already very good cooperation to prevent the departures on the most deadly route towards the EU, which is the Atlantic route.
We have Commissioner Johansson. We have with us a Europarliamentarian, Juan Fernando López Aguilar. He has been president of the Commission of Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs of the European Parliament for many years. You have worked together, and I would like to offer Juan Fernando the floor so that he can make a brief comment.
Thank you, Ylva. It's us to thank you for being here, particularly this day, European Day of Victims of Terrorism, reminding us that we are commemorating that terrible day we all have in mind, March 11th, 2004. And of course, we would like to thank you too for your endeavors, for your delivery through these years. And you made some points, relevant points, the courage it takes to legislate on child sexual abuse online, your endeavors protecting victims. We have enhanced protection of victims all across the European Union, enhancing the directive, which is already in force, and you made a point on migration and asylum. And you refer to it as toxic. I would like you to remind that it's the most divisive issue in the European agenda because it's divisive ideologically, it's divisive geographically, it's divisive both politically and in electoral terms. When it comes to elections, it proves to be divisive. And my question is, the prospects are that far right is on the rise. Do you fear that after the next European election, June the 9th this year, or after a series of national elections, that far on the rise will erode, will be detrimental, will be an obstacle to the Migration and Asylum Pact to fulfill its goal? Or do you trust that regulations, once finally adopted, will be binding law for all the member states, regardless of the outcome of the next European elections and the sequence of next national elections in the member states? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Fernando, for your comments and your question, and also for our very good cooperation, and not at least when it comes to the migration files. First, I think the far right, they live out of fear. That's what they are breathing, fear, and that they need to know to try to put fear into people, and they use migration to put fear, saying it's uncontrollable, it's not manageable. You know, they are putting a lot of lies out there. And I think what we are showing with the pact is, no, it's not true. It's sometimes a challenge, yes, but it's manageable. And we can manage migration in an orderly way, respecting the values that we believe in, if we do it together, because we are so strong when we work together. And I think this is a very, very important message to our voters, to the citizens, that migration is manageable. We have a lot of challenges. Yeah? We have war in our neighborhood. We have a climate crisis. We have a lot of challenges. But migration is manageable. And to direct it to your question, no, I'm not afraid that the pact will not stand. I think it will be adopted in April by Parliament, and then we will start with implementation. And member states are eager to start with implementation. And from the Commission side, we're going to step up. We're going to come earlier than necessary with our implementation plans. We got additional support, financial support from the European Council, and I think that's very good. We got additional 2 billion euros for the implementation. So I'm not afraid that the pact will not deliver or be implemented. I'm quite sure that this will happen. And of course, I will do everything to make sure that this is the case also. Will there be new proposals on migration during the next mandate? Yes, probably. But I don't think that the pact will be changed. But there might be additional, political proposals coming up. That could, of course, happen. And I think that if what we have achieved now is that the migration policy area is a normal policy area. That means when we have agreed to something, that's going to stand. But of course, there might also come, additional things, like in other policy areas. But I'm not afraid that they will turn upside down on the pact. No, I'm not.
Nuria,
There is another question, Madam Commissioner. What do you think about the possibility of reforming Frontex after the criticism made by the European Ombudsman? Can the European Union do anything more to save migrants' lives on European shores?
First, I don't think that we need a big reform of Frontex. I'm quite happy how Frontex works, I must say. We have a new management in Frontex, and that has made a big shift. So now I'm convinced about the dedication of Frontex to protect our borders and to protect our values, and they are doing that on a daily basis. We recently had an evaluation of the Frontex regulation that found out that the Frontex regulation is working well, and member states are really appreciating the kind of support that Frontex is giving them. There was a recent report from the EU Ombudsman. I've read it carefully, and there is no criticism towards Frontex. But the Ombudsman says that there's nothing else to continue on when it comes to criticism, but the Ombudsman would like to even more strengthen the fundamental rights part of Frontex. I'm not convinced that it's necessary, because we already have a strong role for the fundamental rights, what is it called? Fundamental rights, the officer, yeah. No, but also the function of the person. So I must say that there was a lot of criticism towards Frontex during the previous management. And this has shifted totally with the new executive director and the new deputy executive directors. And I think that we have a very good agency in Frontex. Are there challenges for Frontex? Yes, there are. We need better education for the standing corps. We need swifter deployments. We need more specialized people. We need also member states to be swifter in deploying people into Frontex. But I can't really see that we have a problem with fundamental rights in Frontex.
The Spanish Constitutional Court has allowed an appeal in the case of the tragedy in El Tarajal in Ceuta, where irregular immigrants tried to enter Spain 10 years ago, and 14 people died. Ludovic, one of the survivors of this tragedy, has reported Spain to the Torture Committee of the UN, together with a Spanish NGO, whose representative is going to say a few words. Estrella Galán. Please stand so that the camera can take you. Good morning, Commissioner. Thank you very much. The Spanish Committee for Helping Refugees is extremely concerned about the role that Spain has played, together with other southern European countries, in terms of the results of the Migration Pact, because we believe that southern countries really got the raw deal, got the worst deal because of this role to control borders, because vis-à-vis the lack of solidarity of other countries which may decide whether to welcome migrants or pay to reject those migrants. So in this respect, we would like to know how the European Union and the Commission are going to guarantee that places like the Canary Islands or other parts of the southern border of Europe are not going to become large centers of like areas for the reception of migrants, as for example in the Greek islands. So we are concerned about the lack of proposals for legal pathways in the plan. So what type of legal pathways are being developed to prevent deaths on the sea, or situations like those we saw in Ceuta or Melilla? And in those implementation plans, what guarantees, what tools, what monitoring tools are you going to implement to prevent states from respecting human rights and providing guarantees to refugees? Because we shouldn't forget that the flows of migrants coming to our country are mixed flows, with migrants and refugees in the same boat. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. First, I think, as I said in my beginning, I truly believe this, and I think I have also the others that have been involved in this dialogue and the negotiations. The pact is not a zero-sum game. It's not about winners and losers. It's actually a way to deal with migration together. And that's why it was possible to reach such a broad agreement with very few member states voting against. So the southern countries are those that have most of the irregular arrivals. But when it comes to the asylum seekers, we have more in other member states, because the majority of asylum seekers are arriving by plane. We had last year, as I told you, 380,000 irregular arrivals. We had at the same time 1.1 million asylum applications. That means 2/3 of those that apply for asylum have not arrived irregularly. Many of them have arrived on visas or visa-free, or have been staying here for long and then apply for asylum in another member state, for example. So it's important that we see that. But there is a special challenge if you are a country that receive people arriving by boat, for example, under very, very difficult and dangerous circumstances. So that's why these countries need special support. So what we have put in here is, for the first time, there is in legislation, the minimum number of relocations is 30,000 per year. And you know, when we do a lot of relocation voluntarily in the EU, for example, after the fire in Moria, we relocated 5,000. Yeah? Now we have a much higher number in the legislation that will be agreed and voted in Parliament. So I think this is really unprecedented that we have that in. We should also recognize that there are other ways to support member states as well. And so far, very few countries of first arrival ask for relocation. It's more common to ask for other kind of support. For example, to decongest islands, or to have other kind of support, and support to third countries to also prevent the dangerous departures. And when it comes to the reception facilities at the borders, there is a limit. So they cannot be overcrowded. So there is a limit. So and we have put also that in legislation to make sure that it's not too much pressure on the countries of first entry. So it's the same number, 30,000, for the capacity for countries of first entry at a given moment, to make sure that if there is a situation that more people arrive, then the countries of first entry are not obliged to use this border procedure for them, because we can't have that we can't have overcrowded centers, and we can't, have our unlimited people, stuck at the borders. So that is put in to give this balance, and I think there is a balance here between solidarity and responsibility. The legal pathways is absolutely. So first, also there is also agreed in the pact that all member states need to have an independent monitoring mechanism to make sure that people have the access to the asylum procedure. And that is about the screening process, which is the first that happens when you come irregular to a third country. And that will have to be in place in all member states in an independent monitoring mechanism. So I think that is one safeguard for protecting the fundamental rights. Legal pathways, as I said also in my beginning, it's absolutely necessary. And we are having a lot of people coming legally to the European Union. What I would like to see is that we use that more systematic. That's why I started something that we call legal, we call talent partnership. So we have that, are establishing that with our neighbors. We are establishing that with Morocco, with Tunisia, with Egypt, and also with Bangladesh and Pakistan. They're not our neighbors, but we have a lot of people actually coming there. So there we have a comprehensive agreement that they take back their citizens that do not have the right to stay in the EU, and we support the people to come to work in the European Union. And we can also support them by doing the training before they leave, or their language courses before they leave. So this is what we are now setting up, and I think this is the right way to address it. I'm a little bit frustrated because we have a lot of countries like Spain that are really doing a lot when it comes to legal pathway. You have a very good cooperation, especially with Morocco, but also with other third countries when it comes to legal pathway. And the labor migration is a national competence, and I have no problem with that. But if we could join forces, we could be so much stronger, even if it's still a national competence. But if we're acting like a Team Europe, also when it comes to legal migration, that will make it more obvious to the third countries and their citizens which opportunities actually exist in the European Union. So this is what I hope for, that member states will agree to have more of European approach, even if it's a national decision how many should come to that country.
Commissioner, a few months ago in an event at the European Parliament, you were very moved when you heard the horrible testimonies of victims, and over 500,000 signatures were registered to support your proposal for a European legislation against child abuse online. And this met the skepticism of several countries, even the frontal opposition of certain countries, and digital platforms that believe that the law will open some cracks or will become a kind of big brother. Do you think that this law will be approved before the European elections in June? Another question is, what is the situation of the possibility to scan private messages of citizens to look for criminal content that may affect people children underage?
Yes, first, no, it will not be approved before the European election. What we are aiming at is to have a general approach in the Council during the Belgian presidency, and after that will the trialogue start. So that will be with the new Parliament. So yes, I hear this criticism that people got the private communication going to be, supervised by somebody, and that is absolutely not true. All our private communication have been scanned for more than 10 years. all the channels that you have been using. Now more and more are being end-to-end encrypted, but that is quite new. Yeah? Just a few years ago, we were all using not encrypted messenger and everything to send our pictures from holiday pictures on our children are naked and bathing and all that we do all the time. And we have never been reported to the police. Huh? You never heard about anybody. And this has been ongoing, and the technology is getting better and better. And why can I say that nobody is looking or reading? It's because how the technology works. The technology works as a police dog. So for example, if there is a carousel of luggage at the airport, you can let the police dog in to sniff all the luggage. And the police dog will not know what's in unless there is cocaine. And if there is cocaine, the police dog will say, hey, here's cocaine. But if it's not cocaine, the dog won't know what's in it. And this is how the technology works. It can just recognize when there is child sexual abuse material. And this is very, very well defined. And it's important to say that US have stronger rules than we have in the EU. UK recently approved the E-Safety Act, which is very similar to the proposal I have put on the table. So they can do the detection also in end-to-end encrypted communication if necessary to protect children and to go after the perpetrators. Australia has a stronger regulation than we have. There is a huge risk, if my proposal is not approved, that we will be a safe haven in the EU. And you should know that the majority of all child sexual abuse material is already hosted here in the European Union. So it's important that we act. And can I also say that companies today, if you use end-to-end encrypted communication, they detect everything before you send it, yeah? To make sure that you are not sending virus. Because if you are sending virus, then you won't use that communication anymore. So we are protecting our devices from virus with detection, also in end-to-end encrypted communication. And I say, why can't we protect the most vulnerable ones in our society that we know are being victims of one of the most heinous crimes, and very often by somebody close to them? And if we are not detecting, police will not get the reports and children will not be rescued. So I do hope that this will be the outcome. But I can also say that I've learned a lesson by putting this proposal on the table. How strong these internet companies are and how much money they have to use. And I have this feeling that, isn't it time that we treat the internet companies like grown-ups? They've been treated like teenagers for too long. They have to be treated like grown-ups. They have to be responsible for what they do and what they don't.
Commissioner, the Spanish government last Friday approved a law against people trafficking, which is a norm focused on victims, most of them foreign victims. And last Saturday, the Spanish police, in cooperation with Europol, released 13 victims of sexual exploitation in Palma de Mallorca. The agents arrested 17 people of the criminal organization that was exploiting them as sex slaves. So what is the situation of people trafficking in Europe, and to what extent is the European Commission acting against people trafficking?
Thank you. This It's a very important crime, and we are doing a lot. I presented 1 year ago a new legislation against trafficking in human beings, and we managed to get an agreement before the European elections, so this will now be adopted, the new updated directive against trafficking in human beings. We are also having a specialized EU anti-trafficking coordinator, and we also have a lot of expertise in Europol. Can I congratulate the Spanish police for this important? And I think it's important that we go after these, the perpetrators, especially when it comes to those that traffic people for sexual purposes, because it's so profitable to traffic people. Because, you know, if you traffic drugs or weapons, you can only sell it once. But if you traffic a girl, a boy, a woman for sexual purposes, you can sell that body, her body, again and again and again and again. You use the word sex slaves. Yeah? And we have to know that we have to work together with third countries to prevent the trafficking of third country nationals towards EU. But we also have an internal problem. Half of the victims are EU citizens that have been trafficked in the European Union. The majority of children that have been trafficked in the European Union are EU citizens. We had also a case, I think it's 1 or 2 years ago, here in Spain, where we have women from Romania that have been trafficked here for sexual purposes, and they had been tattooed to show who they belong to. So this is such a heinous crime, and it's important that we have the alert in society, but also that we have the expertise in police. And this was one of the things that we really highlighted when we saw all the vulnerable people. You could see them earlier on from Ukraine coming, women and children. And immediately we set up a special task force, a special awareness raising campaign to prevent these people from being trafficked. And so far this has been quite successful, I must say.
Madam Commissioner, you are in a hurry because you have a series of activities to be carried out. My last question, and I apologize to the other people who ask questions because I won't be able to ask all the questions, comes from Catalonia. The Pope yesterday told Zelensky that he should be brave and that the Ukraine should raise the white flag and negotiate with Russia. What do you think about that suggestion from the Pope?
I think that Ukrainians are brave. They have been brave for more than 2 years. I think it's really amazing how brave they are and how they are fighting for their freedom, but also for our freedom. They are fighting for their values, but that is also our values. Just imagine if Putin had been able to just walk in and take Ukraine. And that could still be the outcome. So I should say that Ukraine should continue to raise the blue and yellow flag and continue to be brave. And we need to continue to stand by Ukraine and by the Ukrainian as long as it takes. And we know that this is not going to be easy, but the alternative is a catastrophe.
Señora Comisaria.
Madam Commissioner, I'm going to give you 2 minutes if you agree, for you to say a few words of conclusion. And thank you very much for joining us on behalf of the New Economy Forum, Solaria and Assisa, our partners, represented by Silvia Alonso and Silvia Aguilar. You have the floor, Madam, for conclusions.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor to be here with you, and thank you for listening and for all the interesting questions. I think there is, we can see now for the upcoming EU elections, and we see in the different member states there are coming far-right parties arguing that EU is doing too much. We should do less in the European Union. But can I say, in my portfolio, it's absolutely necessary that we do more. And I think it's very easy to argue who can fight and have a regulation to protect children against, to have a regulation that will regulate what the internet companies can do. Can member states do that? No. We need European Union. How should we deal with artificial intelligence and new threats that might come also with this technology? Can each member state regulate that? No. We need to do it on the European level. When it comes to fighting organized crime, this organized crime is almost never national. It's almost always cross-national. Can member states fight these organized criminal groups, the drug trafficking alone? No. We need a European cooperation, and we need also cooperation with third countries. Can a member state deal with migration alone? No, the only thing you can do in trying to put the problem, so to say, to another member state. The only way to manage migration in an orderly way is to do it together, and to do it together with third countries. So I think it's important to show that there are a lot of challenges. We talked about Ukraine. How can we support Ukraine? Can member states do that alone? No, that's not enough. We have to do it as European Union. So I would like to wish for that these European elections will also focus on areas where we absolutely need the European cooperation and European solutions, because otherwise we won't be able to deal with these challenges. Thank you.